One is quite controversial. It's caused quite a big storm around it. This is the comments of the BBC radio host Nihal Arthanayake, who said that he was struggling with his mental health because he works in an overwhelmingly white working environment at the BBC. Could he have a point, Madeline, that there's not enough diversity at the BBC when it comes to skin colour?
Well, I think the BBC's chief problem is one of diversity of thought and diversity of opinion. I think there is a real inherent kind of liberal bias, and often stories are not commissioned because people at the BBC aren't even aware of this bias, so they wouldn't think to commission certain things, or things are framed in a certain way. It's often very subtle. I mean, obviously, this is his experience. I've never tried to say that it's not, like, true or valid, but I just think that if you are in a country that is 82% white, finding that if you're in a situation where you are the only non-white person, that this is a matter of mental health and great anguish, I would suggest that's not a healthy way of looking at society, because statistically speaking, it's likely that from time to time you will be surrounded by white people, and it's not evidence of some racist conspiracy. That's just, that's just the nature of this country.
Amy, I wonder what you'll say on this. Are you going to say something that might surprise me? Is it a little bit racist to suggest that being around too many white people in your office is bad for your mental health?
What he said was not racist, because let's look at the context and let's look at the intention. The intention was not to be prejudiced or discriminatory in any way. It was a journalism event for underrepresented groups to open up a discussion about diversity. We do have a problem with underrepresentation in journalism, because there are still so many barriers, which I'm sure we've all faced. Unpaid internships, very low wages. You have to be expected to live in the city at the beginning of your career. And I think he was trying to open up a discussion about that. But
it was
now,
rather clumsy, Amy.
I agree.
He said, it's really affecting me that I walk in and all I see is white people.
I guess what he's doing...
It's a bit mean, isn't it?
But his intention, if we're being really fair, he expected...
Or generous.
Generous. I just feel bad that... Because he's done quite a lot for conversations around diversity, and if we are going to progress and address this problem, we do need to talk about it.
And Amy, you make a really good point
down.
about these unpaid internships and the people having to live in the centre of cities. But it's the centre of cities that are more diverse than the rest of the country proportionally.
He was speaking genuinely from the heart at a conference for young journalists. So to take the comments completely out of context, it's a bit frustrating, because I think he was bringing up something that is a valid concern.
Well, I think, if anything, if you're speaking to young journalists at the very beginning of their career, you have to be more careful rather than less careful, because you don't want to demoralise people and create a sense that it's all hideous, people are horrible, people are vile, you will feel like an outsider.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to me very inspiring. And actually, Tom, your point about the makeup of cities, I think that's also very important. If we only discuss race, we ignore socioeconomic background and class, which is obviously not instantly visible from seeing somebody. That's where the barriers are.
And this is something that I wanted to bring up.
And obviously sometimes that is
story.
associated with race, but it's not always associated with race.
I think it's because certain races are disproportionately represented within a lower socioeconomic.
Yeah, exactly.
Group. So
as I say,
but I feel... Sorry, I feel bad for him.
You feel sorry for him because this is blown up, but he did make very controversial
because he's bringing up something
and also I'm not sure
that
if
needs
it's
addressing.
I'm not sure if... I think the BBC has made a lot of attempts to be more diverse in terms of ethnicity, more so than other businesses and other organisations.
I think also that if you are someone who's working for the state broadcaster, then you do have a kind of perhaps unofficial responsibility to be fairly representative and not say things that are going to be incredibly divisive, because you are in receipt of taxpayers' money. The licence fee is what pays for you to do what you do.
It shouldn't be considered divisive.
Well, I think a lot of people would consider it to be extremely divisive.
They absolutely have.
What if we were to flip it? What if a white person said, I don't like being around too many black people?
But that's simplifying the whole argument, because there isn't systemic racism against white people. So it's a completely different sentiment.
Well, let's say a white person lived in...
He could have helped himself by just saying, when I walk in, I don't see enough brown and black faces. that would have sorted it out.
Yeah,
I think it's the use of saying,
and then we wouldn't be talking about it today.
We probably would, but I think we'd be kinder to him.
Maddie, what were you going to say?
I can't even remember what I was going to say now.
Let's move on.
I know what I was going to say. It's just that if a white person lived in a country which was predominantly of someone of a different ethnicity, it would be very odd for them to say, oh, I feel so outnumbered and it's bad for my mental health. I think you just say, right, I live in, India. Nigeria or India. It's not entirely shocking if I'm occasionally the only white person around. It's just numbers.
That sounds an awful lot like common sense. No, Maddie.
No, it's racism.
We have a diverse community. I mean, everyone deserves to have representation at all levels of all businesses. Surely.
Well, okay. Well, I think our country is doing pretty well in terms of that. But
we could do better.
But there is a linking story to this, which is an Ofcom study that has come out in the last 24 hours suggesting that working class audiences, perhaps these people that might feel most underrepresented, say that the BBC is now too politically correct and lacking an unvarnished opinion. They've raised the lack of people like Jeremy Clarkson on the screens of the BBC these days.
Too.
Also Ricky Gervais. And the research found that the broadcaster is considered out of touch on the portrayal of working class characters as well. Is there a class issue at the BBC?
Yes, I think there is a big one. I think there is this general balance towards a sort of soft liberal bias and also an urban leaning over rural. It's one of many things that isn't accounted for. And actually, if you go back over previous decades, shows that were about working class people were much less kind of preachy and showing people in gritty environments. It was much more humorous, funny, a bit more light-hearted, perhaps. And actually, a lot of the documentaries on the BBC have become very solemn and preachy as well. I don't think that it's got that same lightness of touch that it might have had. I'm
not sure it's just the BBC, though. I think it's sort of our culture has kind of gone a bit that way, depending on whether it's stand-up comedy, for example. Everyone's sort of treading on eggshells over what you can and can't say. It's all kind of sanitised, because everyone's worried about saying the wrong thing, putting a foot wrong. Do you share that view? Can you see that, why people might feel that way?
I don't think so at all. I think we're just getting a bit more socially aware with what we consume. But can I talk about that the social class issue? Because it makes me think of the programming in like the 2010s when we all dined out on this kind of poverty porn type TV shows, and they were the majority.
Like Benefits Britain.
Exactly, Benefits Britain. And I think one thing that the BBC does exceptionally well is does pieces of looking into poverty in a very in a responsible way that I don't think other programmers and networks have done historically. So I don't think that the BBC. I think it would be insulting to the audience to suggest that there is a bias within the social class. I don't know, but was this from viewers? You said it.
Well, this is an Ofcom survey, and perhaps the most interesting thing. Only 55% of people from working class and lower income households had a positive view of the BBC, compared to 67% of middle class professionals. So there is a gap in perceptions between people of lower economic status.
And I think often their solution to this is very patronising. They think, oh, well, BBC4, that's for our middle class enlightened audience, and they talk in very snobby tones about like C2, CD1, or whatever they're called.
C2, DT,
yes.
D2, and
you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. That they think that the way to attract lower socioeconomic backgrounds, or however they would phrase it, is to have dumbed down programming which just insults everybody. Like Radio 4 is for the middle class people, and then we've got like BBC 3 for the plebs, and BBC 3 is mostly rubbish.
To be fair, I must be a pleb because I do enjoy the odd BBC.
And I won't hear a word said against RuPaul's Drag Race.
Anyway, someone